The morning sun glinted off the marble of Arlington National Cemetery, casting long, solemn shadows across the tomb of the unknown soldier. The air was heavy, not just with silence, but with the weight of tradition, sacrifice, and honor. The tomb guard stood motionless, his face unreadable, his posture razor sharp. Every inch of his uniform was perfection. Every step he took measured down to the millimeter. To the crowd, he was more statued than man, the embodiment of discipline itself. But then, the crowd began to murmur. Black SUVs pulled up beyond the gates, escorted by Secret Service. Cameras started rolling, and in a moment that no one expected, former President Donald Trump stepped out, waving confidently as he approached the tomb. The silence around the sacred monument cracked. Reporters whispered. Veterans straightened their backs. Children tugged at their parents' sleeves. Everyone knew the tomb was not a place for speeches, commands, or political gestures. Here, even the most powerful man in the world was expected to stand quietly and respect the fallen. Trump stopped a few feet from the guard. He squinted at the soldier, his face firm, his tone commanding. "Son, give me a salute." A hush swept through the crowd. Those 6 words fell heavy in the air. The request wasn't just unusual, it was against military protocol. The tomb guards never break formation, they don't speak. They don't salute anyone while on duty, not even the commander-in-chief. For a long moment, the guard didn't move. The only sound was the faint click of a camera shutter somewhere in the crowd. Trump's hand lifted slightly, as if expecting a response. The tension was unbearable. People were holding their breath, and then the guard's eyes shifted, ever so slightly. His voice, when it came, was calm, measured, and raised. "Sir, the unknowns do not answer to any man." The words cut through the silence like thunder. Even the Secret Service agents froze. The statement was respectful, yet unshakable. A line drawn not out of arrogance, but out of unbreakable duty. For the first time that day, even Trump himself seemed taken aback. The crowd didn't cheer, they didn't move. They simply watched as the guard turned his eyes forward again, returning to perfect stillness. Because honor, in that moment, had spoken louder than power. Long before that unforgettable moment at the tomb, Sergeant Nathan Cole had already lived a lifetime in silence. He wasn't born into the spotlight, or molded by fame. He was shaped by the quiet echoes of war. Years ago, Nathan had served in Afghanistan. He wasn't the loudest or the bravest, but he was the one who always volunteered to stand the night watch. If someone has to stay awake, he'd say, "Let it be me." His closest friend, Private Mason Reed, used to joke that Nathan was born to guard something sacred. He just hadn't found it yet. That was before the ambush. One night, under a moonless sky, their unit was hit. Mason didn't make it back. Nathan carried his dog tags home, along with the guilt that never let him sleep the same again. When he returned to the States, he didn't want noise, medals, or attention. He wanted purpose. He wanted stillness. That's when he applied for the 3rd U.S. Infantry Regiment, the Old Guard. The selection was brutal. Months of precision drills, sleepless nights, and an expectation of perfection so high it broke most men. But Nathan endured. He found meaning in silence. He found redemption in discipline. Every step before the tomb was a promise that, as long as he stood, the unknowns would never be forgotten. Each shift began the same way. He would check his uniform in the mirror, no lint, no wrinkle, not even a thread out of place. Then he'd touch the worn dog tags in his pocket, Mason's, and whisper, "This is for you, brother." To him, the tomb wasn't just a monument, it was a sacred vow between the living and the lost. A space untouched by politics, ego, or chaos. But that sacred stillness was about to be tested by a man known for breaking tradition. Meanwhile, in Washington, Donald Trump had been preparing for his visit. Officially, it was a day of remembrance, a short appearance at Arlington to honor the fallen. But privately, his staff had encouraged something more symbolic, something viral. One aide had told him, "Sir, if you salute the guard and he salutes back, it'll be powerful." A picture of respect. Trump had nodded, his mind already working. He respected the military, but he also understood the power of moments. Moments that looked strong, that commanded headlines. He wasn't planning disrespect, he was planning dominance through ceremony, the kind of gesture cameras couldn't ignore. But no one in his circle understood the strict code of the tomb guards. They didn't know that even the president was bound by the same unspoken rule. Silence before the unknowns. When the motorcade pulled up that morning, Nathan had already been on duty for 2 hours. The sun had barely begun to rise when he took his post, pacing 21 steps, turning, pausing 21 seconds, then pacing again. His mind was empty, his breathing steady. Each step carried the same weight as every soldier who'd ever walked that path. Before him, he didn't see the flashing cameras at first. He didn't register the crowd growing beyond the gates. He didn't even notice when the black SUVs arrived. To him, there was no world beyond the tomb, only duty. But the energy shifted. The silence, the sacred silence, began to stir. He heard the faint murmur of reporters, the distant clack of lenses focusing, and the familiar, unmistakable rhythm of Secret Service boots on stone. Then came the voice, bold, unmistakable, and commanding. "Soldier, stand tall." Nathan didn't flinch. He didn't look, he didn't react. The rules were clear. The guard never breaks focus, no matter who speaks. But then, the voice came again, closer this time. "Son, give me a salute." Inside Nathan's chest, a storm began to build, not of fear, but of conflict. His body was trained to obey authority, but his oath was to the unknowns, not to the living. Every tomb guard carries that creed deep within his bones. My standard will remain perfection. My mission never falter. The crowd began to notice the tension. Some whispered in confusion, others lifted phones to record. They didn't know what they were witnessing wasn't just a scene, it was a collision between power and principle. In that instant, Nathan remembered Mason, his friend's last words before that final mission. "Don't ever bend for anyone, Nate, even when they outrank you. If it's wrong, stand your ground." Now, standing mere feet away from the most powerful man in America, those words echoed in his head like gunfire. He could feel the weight of eyes upon him, Trump's, the cameras, the veterans in the crowd. But Nathan Cole wasn't just a man in uniform. He was the line between ceremony and sacred duty. And as the next moment approached, the one that would soon shake the internet and echo through history, he steadied his breath, adjusted his rifle, and prepared to do the hardest thing any soldier can do: say no, with honor. The cemetery was never meant to host chaos. It was a place where even whispers felt too loud, where respect was measured not by words, but by silence. But that morning, the silence began to break. As Donald Trump stepped closer to the tomb, the air itself seemed to tighten. The clicking of cameras echoed like distant gunfire. Reporters jostled for position. Secret Service agents scanned the crowd with subtle tension. Trump stopped just 3 paces from the white marble structure, his shadow falling across the guard's boots. His expression was firm, a mixture of curiosity and expectation. "An impressive discipline," he said loudly, as if addressing both the soldier and the cameras at once. The tomb guard, Sergeant Nathan Cole, didn't respond. His eyes remained fixed straight ahead, locked in the sacred stance of the 21-step vigil. Trump tilted his head slightly, studying the soldier. "I said it's impressive," he repeated. This time a little louder. Still no response. The president glanced toward the crowd, offering a half smile. "They train you not to talk, huh?" he remarked, prompting a few uneasy chuckles from the onlookers. One of the veterans in the crowd muttered under his breath, "Sir, that man's not allowed to break his post." But the words were swallowed by the hum of camera drones overhead. Trump took another slow step forward. He wasn't being cruel, not yet, but he was used to control, used to eye contact, acknowledgement, obedience. And in front of the world's cameras, the silent defiance of a single soldier felt like a challenge. "Soldier," he said firmly, "you can relax. It's me you can salute." Nathan's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. His breathing remained even, the kind of composure that comes from thousands of hours of repetition. Every muscle in his body was screaming to stay still. Protocol was clear. No acknowledgement while on post. The guard doesn't recognize rank, office, or power, only the eternal duty to those who can no longer speak. The crowd could feel the tension mounting. Parents whispered to their children. A reporter whispered into her mic. The guard remains unresponsive, even as former President Trump speaks directly to him. Trump's smile began to fade. He turned to his aides, irritation flickering behind his eyes. "Is he supposed to ignore me?" he asked. One aide stammered, "Sir, it's protocol." "They don't. I'm not asking for much," Trump interrupted. "A simple salute. That's respect." He turned back toward Nathan. His tone softened, trying a different approach. "You're doing a great job, soldier. You represent the very best. Go on, just give me one salute. We'll make it quick." Nathan didn't blink, didn't move, didn't breathe differently. The crowd's energy shifted, admiration from some, discomfort from others. A young boy whispered to his mother, "Why won't he do it?" She placed a hand on his shoulder. "Because he's guarding someone who can't ask him to." A group of veterans at the back of the crowd stood taller. They knew what they were witnessing, not defiance, but disciplined under fire. They had once lived by that same code, obey orders but never dishonor the fallen. Trump exhaled sharply through his nose. The silence was beginning to feel hostile. "All right," he said, his voice rising slightly. "You don't want to move. Fine, I'll stand right here then." He folded his arms, glancing back toward the cameras as if to reclaim the moment. But instead of admiration, what filled the air was an uneasy stillness. The tomb guard continued his ritual. 21 steps, turn, pause, 21 seconds, turn again. Each motion was precise, deliberate, as if the world outside didn't exist. The rhythm of the steps began to echo in everyone's chest. Even Trump seemed momentarily lost in the gravity of it, the sound of boots on marble, the living heartbeat of respect. But then, just as the guard turned for his next pass, a voice from the crowd shouted, "Show the president some respect." Gasps followed. Trump's eyes flicked toward the source, then back to the soldier. He smiled faintly, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Seems like people agree," he said. "It's a salute, not a crime." He took another step forward, dangerously close to the chain barrier that separated the public from the sacred ground. A Secret Service agent subtly placed a hand near his sleeve, murmuring, "Sir, best not to," but Trump brushed him off. "It's fine. I'm not doing anything wrong." The crowd began to whisper. Some lifted their phones. Trump was now within a breath's distance of the tomb guard, close enough to see the reflection of his red tie in the soldier's polished brass belt buckle. "Soldier," he said again, quietly now, but with steel in his tone, "look at me." The word struck harder than a shout. Nathan's pulse quickened. His heart pounded against the walls of discipline, holding him still. But he didn't move. Trump's brows furrowed. "You're ignoring a direct request from your former commander-in-chief," he said. The soldier's silence was his only answer. Then it happened. Trump extended a hand, gesturing toward the rifle resting on Nathan's shoulder. "That must be heavy," he said, half sarcastic. "How about you take a break?" That line crossed the invisible boundary. A ripple of murmurs rolled through the crowd. A veteran shouted, "Sir, please." Even the Secret Service shifted uneasily. They knew touching or addressing the guard on post was strictly forbidden, but Trump, lost in the moment, reached forward just an inch too far, his hand brushing the edge of the tomb guard's sleeve. The sound that followed wasn't a shout. It wasn't violence. It was the sharp, synchronized click of a rifle being adjusted into ready position, precise, cold, and final dot. The crowd froze. Every camera focused. The air turned electric. Trump's hand dropped instantly. The guard's movements were fluid, no aggression, no hesitation, just a crisp return to perfect form. Eyes forward, rifle angled, stillness restored. For a moment, time stopped. Even Trump seemed uncertain, part of him irritated, part of him impressed. He glanced toward the nearby colonel, who was watching with a look that could only be described as controlled panic. And in that fragile silence, the crowd realized something profound. They weren't watching a power struggle anymore. They were watching a man defending a code older than any office. Children clutched their parents' hands. Reporters whispered into microphones, barely daring to breathe. One elderly veteran took off his cap and placed it over his heart. The tension was unbearable. Everyone waiting to see what would happen next. Would the guard finally break silence? Would Trump push again? Would the colonel intervene? Every second stretched into eternity. The world's most powerful man had just met a soldier who wouldn't bend, not for applause, not for politics, not for anything. The crowd didn't know it yet. But the next few seconds would become a defining moment in modern military history, because in the next heartbeat the turning point would arrive. The guard would finally speak. And his single, calm line would not only shatter protocol, it would silence the entire nation. The sun had climbed higher over Arlington, but its warmth did nothing to soften the tension. Every eye was fixed on Sergeant Nathan Cole, the man who had become the living symbol of silence, discipline, and unshakable duty. Trump had stepped even closer, now just a few inches away from the sacred line that no civilian, not even a former president, was supposed to cross. The cameras were rolling live, broadcasting this surreal tableau to thousands of viewers who were already glued to screens across the nation. Trump said, his voice sharper now, "You don't have to take this so seriously. It's just a salute. One gesture, that's all." Nathan didn't flinch. His eyes remained forward, his jaw tight. The rifle rested perfectly against his shoulder. 21 steps, turn, pause, 21 seconds, turn, repeat. Each movement was a rhythm, older than the politics playing out before him, but Trump wasn't listening. He stepped closer still, letting his hand hover near Nathan's shoulder, a subtle test, a push beyond decorum. The crowd collectively held its breath. Some instinctively moved closer to the barrier to get a better view. Cameras zoomed in, capturing every nuance. Then Trump spoke again, louder, almost commanding. "Come on, salute me. You can look at me. Don't be afraid." That single sentence broke the invisible line. Nathan's pulse quickened, not out of fear, but out of the immense responsibility resting on his shoulders. Every tomb guard knows the weight of that line, the moment when personal courage must match the weight of tradition. He adjusted his stance slightly, the click of his boots on marble echoing louder than anyone expected. The crowd could hear it. The veterans in the audience felt it in their chests. Every camera lens seemed to focus not just on the man, but on the code he represented. Trump leaned in, a hand now dangerously close to Nathan's sleeve. "It's just respect," he said. "I'm not asking for anything heroic here, just a salute." Nathan's mind flashed back to the words of his fallen comrade, Mason Reed. "Don't ever bend for anyone, Nate, even when they outrank you. If it's wrong, stand your ground." He felt the weight of every soldier who had stood before him. Every life lost in defense of freedom, every vow to the unknowns who could no longer speak, and then he spoke. "Sir, the unknowns do not answer to any man." The words were calm, measured, final. The crowd froze. Cameras clicked frantically. Reporters whispered in disbelief. Even the Secret Service agents froze for a heartbeat, unsure how to react. Trump's hand dropped slowly, almost instinctively. His eyes widened slightly, not in anger, but in recognition. Recognition that this man had just delivered the ultimate act of discipline. The silence that followed was deafening. No applause, just the weight of the words settling over Arlington like a tidal wave. The veterans in the crowd exhaled slowly, some nodding in quiet approval. Children stared, unsure if what they were seeing was courage, defiance, or something greater. The cameras didn't need to cut, they couldn't. Every frame was a masterclass in principle over power. Trump opened his mouth, likely to speak again, but the words never came. Nathan adjusted his rifle with a precise click, resuming the 21-step ritual as though nothing had happened, perfectly still, perfectly disciplined. The contrast was stunning. A man who could command billions, and a soldier whose silence spoke louder than any words. The crowd gasped collectively. The tension that had built over minutes, hours, if you counted the preparation, finally exploded into stunned awe. Every person there realized this was not a political confrontation. It was a lesson in honor. Even the aides tried to intervene, whispering hurriedly to Trump, but he simply raised a hand, acknowledging the impossibility of breaking the moment. He took a small step back, allowing Nathan the space he demanded, the sacred space no one could touch. The guards' calm defiance created a ripple effect. Veterans saluted quietly from the sidelines. Parents held their children tighter. Reporters stopped narrating, letting the weight of the silence speak. Nathan's eyes remained forward, never flinching. Every turn, every pause, every 21 seconds perfect, ritualistic, sacred, unshakable. He had not shouted. He had not moved. He had not bowed. He had simply spoken one line, delivered with absolute conviction. And the world had taken notice. For a moment, history seemed to pause. Arlington was no longer just a cemetery. It was a stage. Nathan Cole was no longer just a soldier. He was a symbol, the embodiment of the principle that some things are bigger than any individual, no matter how powerful. Even Trump, for all his confidence and charisma, was reduced to an observer. He had learned something in those few short moments, the undeniable power of silence. Backed by principle, the crowd began to murmur quietly, almost reverently. A few journalists whispered into their microphones, their voices catching in disbelief. This is historic. He didn't bend. He didn't break protocol, he just held his ground. Nathan's personal reflection remained private. The words of Mason Reed, the memory of war, the countless hours of training, all of it had led to this precise act of courage. One sentence, one unwavering stand, one moment that would ripple across the nation. The turning point had arrived. The confrontation was over, not with violence, not with anger, but with a single, undeniable demonstration of honor. The stage was now set for the climax. The public had witnessed a soldier holding his ground against a former president, but the story wasn't finished. The next moments would reveal just how far discipline and respect could resonate, exposing arrogance, inspiring millions, and cementing Nathan Cole's name in history. In that silence, in that stillness, everyone understood. True power isn't shouted, it's upheld. True authority isn't demanded, it's earned. And tradition isn't weakness, it is strength. The air at Arlington was electric. The sun reflected off the white marble of the tomb, but it could not outshine the tension that hung heavier than ever. Every eye was on Sergeant Nathan Cole, the man who had just delivered the one sentence that would define the morning and echo across history. Trump stood frozen, his hand lowering slowly after brushing the soldier's sleeve moments earlier. For the first time that day, he seemed unsure, not angry, not furious, just caught off guard. He had faced opposition before, but not in silence, not with such calm authority, not with the weight of sacred duty pressing down on every gesture. A murmur ran through the crowd. Reporters leaned closer to microphones, their cameras zoomed tight, capturing every flicker of expression on the former president's face. Veterans nodded subtly, appreciating the unyielding discipline. Children whispered to their parents, eyes wide with awe, sensing that they had witnessed something historic. Trump attempted to regain control. All right, he said, trying to reclaim authority. I meant no disrespect. It's fine. But the words rang hollow. They were not met with relief or understanding, but with the weight of the guard's unwavering silence. Nathan had not wavered for a second. He had not broken protocol. He had not acknowledged the request, and in doing so, he had revealed something far more powerful than any command. The strength of principle over power. A photographer at the front snapped a picture. Nathan, eyes forward, rifle resting perfectly on his shoulder, shadow falling across his polished boots, while Trump's expression wavered mid-step. That single frame would later circulate worldwide, going viral within minutes. Memes, articles, and social media posts exploded across platforms, each one celebrating the unyielding tomb guard who stood for honor. Trump realized, subtly, that the public perception had shifted. The story was no longer about him, about rank, or about authority. It was about Nathan Cole, a man whose silence spoke louder than any speech, whose single line had broken the rhythm of expectation. Even aides whispered hurriedly among themselves, acknowledging that this moment was already spinning out of control in the digital age. Nathan, for his part, remained calm. He didn't glance at the crowd. He didn't smile. He didn't react to the flash of cameras or the sudden stir of applause and murmurs. His training years of painstaking preparation guided every movement. Step, turn, pause, step, turn, pause, dot. Even as Trump and his entourage backed away, the power of the moment lingered. Veterans in the crowd raised hands in quiet salute. A few children, sensing something extraordinary, whispered the word hero to their parents. The cameras captured it all, each frame etching Nathan Cole into history as the man who had upheld tradition under pressure. The colonel supervising the post approached quietly, placing a firm hand on Nathan's shoulder in acknowledgement. No words were exchanged, none were needed. Respect had been given, earned silently, and witnessed globally. Nathan returned to the routine of his vigil, each measured step echoing the unbroken chain of duty stretching back through generations. Meanwhile, news outlets began broadcasting the story. Headlines screamed, "Tomb Guard defies former president in stunning display of discipline. Sergeant Nathan Cole's one line shuts down Trump's command. Arlington moment goes viral. Honor beats authority." Social media erupted. Clips of Nathan's response were shared and reshared, each viewer awestruck at the quiet heroism displayed in the shadow of power. Analysts dissected the moment endlessly, military experts, journalists, and civilians alike recognizing the symbolic victory of principle over ego. Trump, still present but now subdued, took a step back. For the cameras, he maintained composure, but even a subtle glance betrayed a hint of awareness that he had been bested in a domain he could not control. Arlington had remained untouched by politics, untouched by ego, untouched by the attempt to impose authority. The tomb guard had won without moving a muscle, without raising a hand. Nathan's gaze remained fixed ahead, every detail of the tomb perfect. His actions had not been for recognition, nor for glory. They were for the unknowns, the men and women who had given their lives and deserved honor above all else. In that quiet triumph, he had reinforced an eternal truth. Discipline, principle, and respect cannot be commanded. They must be upheld. As Nathan continued his vigil, whispers from the crowd and flashes from the cameras confirmed what everyone had just witnessed. A man had stood, unwavering, against power, and the world had taken notice. The viral moment was no longer just a story, it was a lesson in courage, restraint, and integrity. By the time the crowd began to disperse, the impact of that single act had already traveled far beyond Arlington. Nathan Cole returned to his post, step by step, rifle in hand, unbroken, untouched by ego, embodying a timeless message. Honor cannot be ordered, it must be lived. And in that moment, As the viral videos began circulating across the globe, the world realized something profound. True power is silent, true authority is earned, and true heroes don't need applause, they need only duty. The crowd had slowly begun to disperse, leaving the tomb of the unknown soldier bathed in the soft glow of late morning sunlight. Arlington returned, as it always did, to its sacred stillness, but the memory of what had just occurred lingered in every echo off the marble. Sergeant Nathan Cole continued his routine with perfect precision. Each step, pause, and turn remained exact, a testament to the discipline and focus that had defined him throughout his life. His eyes remained forward, his posture immaculate, but inside, a subtle calm had settled. The colonel supervising the post approached quietly, placing a steady hand on Nathan's shoulder. No words were exchanged, a nod was all that passed between them. In that single gesture, the colonel acknowledged what everyone else had already recognized. Nathan had upheld the highest standard of honor, not for fame, not for recognition, but because it was his duty. A small boy, holding his mother's hand, stepped close enough to whisper softly, almost reverently, "He's a hero." Nathan didn't turn, but a faint tightening at the corner of his eyes betrayed a flicker of emotion. He reached into his uniform pocket and touched the dog tags he always carried. Mason Reed's, a silent reminder that every act of courage was connected to those who had come before him. Nearby, the ceremonial bugler had resumed his solemn tune, signaling the continuation of Arlington's daily ritual. Nathan adjusted his stance, rifles crisp and polished, ready for the next rotation. To the outside world, it was just another shift. But Nathan knew the truth. Today had been unlike any other. Across the country, videos and images were going viral. Clips of Nathan's calm defiance and the one unforgettable line were being shared across social media platforms, discussed on news channels, and dissected by commentators. Some framed it as a lesson in discipline over ego, others as a demonstration of the power of silent courage. But all recognized the same truth. A single man had reminded the world of the unshakable value of principle. Nathan allowed himself a brief moment to reflect. He touched his dog tags again, remembering the friend he had lost in combat. Every ounce of training, every sacrifice, and every sleepless night of preparation had led him here, in a place where millions had walked past, where history whispered from the marble stones. He had acted not for himself, but for those who could no longer speak. The colonel, now standing a few paces away, quietly saluted Nathan. He didn't speak, but the gesture carried a weight heavier than words. In that instant, Nathan realized that the impact of his actions was not just in the viral videos or the headlines, it was in the quiet acknowledgement of those who understood what duty truly meant. Even the crowds that remained at the edge of the cemetery sensed it. Parents turned to their children, whispering lessons of courage. Veterans exchanged knowing glances. Reporters adjusted their cameras, aware that this moment transcended politics, personalities, or power. It had become a lesson in respect, patience, and unwavering principle. Nathan took a slow, measured breath. He returned to his rhythm. 21 steps. Turn, pause. 21 seconds. Repeat. The world outside could erupt, debate, or cheer. But here at the tomb, it was always about the unknowns. Never the living dot. As he walked his final steps before his next rotation, he allowed himself the smallest smile. Not for recognition, not for the viral fame, but for knowing that the lesson of honor had been delivered exactly as it should have been. Discipline had won. Respect had prevailed. Silence had spoken louder than any command or demand, and for Nathan Cole, that was enough. As the sun continued its climb over Arlington, the tomb of the unknown soldier remained still, serene, eternal, and untouched by politics. But the morning's events had left a mark far beyond the cemetery's gate. Across the nation, and indeed the world, people were talking about one soldier, one line, and one unshakable stand for honor. Sergeant Nathan Cole had done something simple yet profound. He had reminded everyone watching that duty is not obedience to power, but obedience to principle. That in a world often ruled by ego, true strength is quiet. True courage is measured not by applause, but by the ability to stand firm when no one else can. This moment wasn't just about a former president or a viral video. It was about tradition, respect, and the unseen heroes who uphold it every single day. Nathan's calm, unwavering response had sparked conversations around the globe, discussions about discipline, integrity, and what it truly means to honor those who gave everything. And now, you, the viewer, have witnessed it too. Let this story be a reminder. Sometimes silence speaks louder than words. Sometimes standing your ground is the greatest statement you can make. If this story inspired you, if you felt that tingle of awe, that sense of pride, or the simple truth of honor in action, share it. Let others see that courage exists in the quiet moments, in the unwavering dedication to what is right. Subscribe to the channel to hear more stories of discipline, heroism, and moments that will leave you speechless. And remember, every share keeps the legacy of these heroes alive, reminding the world that respect, integrity, and honor are never out of style, because some lessons aren't taught in words, they're lived.